Today we're going to learn about how your perspective determines your provision, what God provides for you.
Hello? Oh,
That's good.
God, it should be this close. Hello? Okay, 好。
You know, scarcity is one of the oldest and most pervasive fears of humanity.
缺乏是我们人一向最恐惧的一件事情。
There's a limited amount of resources, but our needs, they seem limitless.
资源是有限的，但是我们的需求是无限的。
If you look up the word lack in Google, you're going to come across a lack of time, education, diversity, money, environmental resources, food, water, peace. The list just keeps going.
如果您去 Google 一下这个缺乏这个字，您会找出一大堆这个不够那个不够的项目。
And it's very easy for us to define our lives by our lack, by what we don't have.
我们常常照着我们的缺乏来为我们的生命做定论。
We aren't strong enough, or beautiful enough, or rich enough, or wise enough, or healthy enough.
不够漂亮，不够健康，不够有钱，不够这个，不够那个。
And how do we know this?
你如何是知道的呢？
Well, we can just compare ourselves to other people.
很简单，就跟别人比比，就觉得哎呀，我这个不够，那个不够。
And when we do that, often we discover that we don't have something we want.
然后当我们这样做的时候，我们就发现，有很多东西是我们要的，但是是缺乏的哦。
The problem is you can start to make your decisions based on what you don't have.
问题就是当你在这个缺乏的时候，你照这个来做决定，来做一些行为的时候。
Someone may ask you, go with me on a walk or a hike, and you might say, I'm not fit enough to do that.
所以当有人问你要不要去爬山啊，你说哎呀，我这个健康不行了，身体不行。
Someone may invite you to a meal, and you may say, I don't have the time or the money to do that.
有人邀请你去吃饭，你就说我时间不够，或者哎呀，钱包缺。
Someone may Someone may ask you to teach a class or volunteer for a ministry, and you may say, I'm not wise enough to do that.
有人请你去教一堂课，或者让你去服务的时候，你就觉得说，哎呀，我不够聪明哎。
See, our perspective can start to determine what we think is actually possible for us.
我们的观点，我们会决定的，我们是哪些事是可能的，或者不可能的。
But the problem is our perspective is usually limited, and we often don't know what resources we have.
但是问题就是说，我们的观点往往是有限的，所以我们常常不知道我们到底有哪些资源是可以供我们使用的。
Sometimes there's resources right in front of us, and we ignore them.
有的资源就是摆在我们的面前，我们就是视而无睹。
In 2005, a man named Edmund set a record for the largest single deposit of pennies.
2005年有一个叫做 Edward 的一个人，他是专门收集这个一分钱的钱币的，结果他拿到银行去兑换的时候，创下一个世界纪录。
He's a 62-year-old man. He managed a gas station in Alabama, and he cashed in 1,308,459 pennies that he had collected over 38 years.
所以这位62岁的老人，他是一个加油站，在经营一个加油站，然后在38年，他收集的130多万个的1分钱的钱币，也就是说大概有13000块左右的美金。
So that's a little over $13,000.
13000块。
But until he cashed it, it was 4.5 tons of dead weight.
在他没有兑现之前，这个就是一堆重达4.5。
It was just sitting in barrels in his basement.
呀，就是在他的那个地下室摆着的一堆。
And now that he's deposited it, though, he has money that he can use for retirement and on his home repairs.
然后他兑现了以后，他就可以好好的退休，甚至可以修复他的房子。
I know that's kind of a silly story, but it shows that often we have resources right under us, and we're not using them.
听起来好像有点搞笑哈，但是事实上我们很多时候我们有一些资源就在我们鼻子底下，但是我们没有办法去应用。
We may have wealth all around us, but if our perspective isn't right, we won't see it.
即使我们有很多的财富，但是我们观点如果不对的话，我们也是没用的。
But the good news is that God gives us what we need to face whatever situation we're in, even if we don't see it.
但是事实，神赐给我们的许多恩赐，让我们能够足以面对一切的所有的境遇，但是即使我们看不到。
God's resources are unlimited, and this is why he can say in Psalm 50:10, "Every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills."
神的资源是无限的，所以在这个诗篇这里讲说，因为树林中的百兽是我的，千山上的牲畜也是我的。
In comparison, God says that our resources are like a broken cistern, like a broken well.
相反的，神说我们的资源就像一个破的水井一样。
In Jeremiah 2:13, Jeremiah writes, he's speaking for God, he says, "My people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and have dug out cisterns for themselves that can hold no water."
耶利米书2章13节说：“因为我的百姓做了2件恶事，就是离弃我这活水的泉源，为自己凿出的池子，是破裂不能存水的池子。”
So often, God has resources that he wants to bring into our lives, but we're just relying on our own broken well.
神要供应我们很多的资源，但是因为我们这个是一个破裂的存水池子，所以我们不能够用。
So we often feel scarcity and lack because we're not seeing the resources God has for us.
所以我们常常会觉得很恐惧、很惧怕，说不够，是因为我们看不到神给我们的供应。
We're like the servant of Elisha who panicked at the army that was surrounding him.
就好像以利沙的仆人看到敌人的包围的时候就怕得要死。
But Elisha prayed for the eyes of his servant to be opened, and then what he saw was chariots of fire and horses, basically God's army that was surrounding them and protecting them.
当以利沙替他祷告，让他把眼睛打开的时候，就看到神的神的军马就是在围着他们，可以保护他们的。
And this is also the case when David battles the giant Goliath, as we're going to look at today.
我们今天看到大卫跟这个巨人的之战呢，也就是一个很好的例子。
And I know most of you have heard this story, so if you haven't, here's the spoiler. David takes down the giant.
所以万一您没有听过这个故事的话，我告诉你这个大结局，那就是大卫他打胜的。
But why was he able to take down the giant? Why was he able to do what an entire army was afraid to do?
为什么他能够战胜这个耶利哥这个巨人呢？当这个所有的以色列军队都不能做的时候，他是怎么能够做到的呢？
What did he see that no one else saw? And why was he willing to face Goliath when no one else was?
所以他看到一些什么别人看不到的呢？以至于让他能够在所有的人都不敢面对这个巨人的时候，他能够面对呢？
And how can we have the same attitude that David had?
所以我们怎么样也能够有这个像大卫一样的这个态度呢？
The passage that we're going to look at is 1 Samuel 17.
这是从撒母耳上17章里面的这个故事。
And just to set the background, Israel is at war with a nation called the Philistines.
一点点背景的介绍，以色列是跟非利士人在打仗。
And Saul is the current king of Israel.
所以国王扫罗是当时的国王。
And so the armies are camped out. We have Israel on one mountain, the Philistines on the other, and in between them there's a valley.
所以两军就是各持山头，中间隔了一个山谷，在那边对持。
And Goliath is the champion of the Philistines, and every day he comes down into the valley and yells up at the Israelites, taunting them.
所以歌利亚就是非利士人的所谓的战神，他每天就出来就跟他们挑战。
Fight me, he'd say. Kill me, and we will be your servants. But if I kill your warrior, you will be our servants.
还有一个人出来跟我征战了，如果是你们赢的话，我们就做你们奴隶；相反的，如果我赢的话，你们就通通做我的奴隶。
But no one fought him. Why was this?
但是没有人敢站出来，为什么？
As we'll see, David had a very different perspective than the rest of Israel's soldiers.
我们看到大卫的感官是跟所有的以色列人都是不同的。
And where they saw failure, he saw opportunity.
他们看到失败，他看到是机会；
Where they saw scarcity, he saw provision.
他们看到的是欠缺，他看到的是供应。
And where they saw sure defeat, he saw a no-lose situation.
他们看到是一定是大败的结果，他看到是绝对不可能输的。
And it's so interesting to me that everyone was in the same situation, but they saw things so very differently.
我就觉得很有意思，就是同样的状况，每个人看法都不同。
See, David saw through eyes of faith, and so he was victorious.
透过信心的眼睛来看，所以他就看到胜利。
So how do we see like David did?
那我们怎么样能够像大卫一样来看事情呢？
So when you look at this story, there's 3 questions that are in the story that can help you evaluate how you see situations you face.
从这个事，我们可以问3个问题，
So the first question is this a test?
就是说这是个考验。
1 Samuel 17:16 says, For 40 days the Philistine came forward and took his stand, morning and evening.
上17、16说，那非利士人早晚都出来站着，如此40日。
And whenever you see the phrase 40 days in the Bible, your ears need to perk up.
在这里40个日的话，你的耳朵就要支棱起来咯。
40 days means a test is happening.
呀，40天表示这是一个试验的开始。
Noah and his family were in the ark for 40 days.
挪亚跟他的家人在这个方舟里面待了40天。
Moses was on the mountain with God for 40 days.
摩西也在山顶与神同在了40日之久。
The 12 spies went into the promised land for 40 days.
所以12个支派探子到这个迦南地也是逛了40日之久。
In the story of Jonah, Nineveh was given 40 days to repent.
所以这个尼尼微也是神给了他们40日来忏悔。
Jesus fasted in the wilderness for 40 days.
耶稣在旷野里面禁食祷告也是40天。
And after Jesus rose, he appeared to his followers for 40 days.
所以当耶稣死后复活，也是向他的门徒们显现了40天。
And surrounding all of these events is the question, is God dependable? Will he deliver his people?
所以这些的事件就是问我们一个问题：神是可靠的吗？他会拯救我们吗？
And this is true with Goliath. He stood and shouted at Israel for 40 days.
所以这个歌利亚也是这个巨人，他挑战校正了有40天之久。
And this is what he said, Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. And the Philistine said, I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together.
所以这个是非利士歌利亚的叫骂。歌利亚对着以色列的军队站立，呼叫说：“你们出来摆列队伍做什么呢？我不是非利士人吗？你们不是扫罗的仆人吗？可以从你们中间拣选一人，使他下到我这里来。他若能与我战斗，将我杀死，我就做你们的仆人；我若胜了他，将他杀死，你们就做我的仆人，服侍我。”那非利士人又说：“我今日向以色列的军队骂阵，你们叫一个人出来与我战斗。”
Could God have struck Goliath down all on his own without Israel lifting a finger?
神是不是可以就当场把这个歌利亚击毙，以色列人不用做任何的事情呢？
He most definitely could have done that, but God often allows in his love for us what he could prevent in his power.
所以神当然是可以，但是因为他爱我们，所以他 时常是让这个事情能够让我们自己去面对。
He was giving Israel a test.
他是给以色列人一个试验。
And a test is designed to examine the characteristics of something.
所以试验往往是为了测验一个人一个事情的本质。
A test is designed to see if there's imperfections or faults in something.
那看看这个事件里面有没有什么错的不好的地方。
And so God allows trials and tests into our lives to see, are we going to rely on him? Are we going to move past our fears?
所以神透过一些事件的试炼我们，让我们知道说，我们是否有在信靠他们，我们是不是能够通过他的测验呢？
And maybe you had some grumpy teachers in school who wanted you to fail tests, but God isn't like that.
也许您经历过一些老师，就是存心要你过不去的，但是神不是如此。
God actually wants us to pass the tests that he gives us, and he gives us the strength that we need to pass it.
那神是要我们透过这个测验，而且他给我们这个力量，让我们能够通过这个测验。
1 Corinthians 10:13, no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with every temptation he will provide a way of escape, that you may be able to endure it.
哥林多前书这里说，你们所遇见的试探，无非是人所能受的。神是信实的，并不叫你们受试探过于能受的。在受试探的时候，总要给你们开一条出路，叫你们能忍受得住。
And the word temptation in this verse is the very same word used for test.
所以这里讲的这个试探，就是我们刚刚讲的试炼是一样的。
So this verse is telling us that for every test God gives us, he also gives us a way out, a way to pass that test.
所以神给我们一些试验或者试探的时候，往往是给我们有一条活路、一条出路的。
So whenever we face a test, we should ask God two things. What should I do, and what should I learn?
所以当我们面对试验的时候，我们要问两个问题，就是说我应该做什么，我要学的是什么。
Because God gives us a way to pass the test. In every test, there is a lesson and there's a form of deliverance that God has given us in that test.
所以每一个试验中都是有个功课要学，而且神会给我们开一个出路的。
You just need to trust him and keep your eyes open and look for what he's teaching you and the way that he's going to pull you out of that test.
所以您就是要专心的去学习，然后看看神是如何给你开这个出路，而且神要你学的是什么。
It's important to remember that God's tests for us aren't meant to break us, but they're meant to make us stronger.
所以神给我们试验不是要击败我们，他是要我们变得更强壮。
And just like gold is tested and refined in the fire, we're tested and refined in our trials.
就像金子要在火里千锤百炼，我们也是如此。
This is why James could write, "Count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be made perfect and complete, lacking in nothing."
所以在这个雅各书这样说，我的弟兄们，你们落在百般试炼中，都要以为大喜乐，因为知道你们的信心经过试炼，就生出忍耐。但忍耐也当成功，使你们成全完备，毫无缺陷。
So when Goliath mocked Israel for 40 days, God was allowing him to do it to test their heart. Would they trust him?
所以神允许葛利亚在这个阵前叫骂了40天之久，是为了试验以色列人他们的信心。
And would they see deliverance through the test?
他们在这个试验中有没有看到神给他们开的道路呢？
Unfortunately, they failed the test.
很可惜的，他们失败了，没通过。
1 Samuel 17:11 says, "When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid."
这撒母记上17章11节，扫罗和以色列众人听见非利士人的这些话，就惊慌，极其害怕。
But why were they afraid, and why did they fail the test?
所以他们为什么这么惊慌？为什么他们没有通过这个试验呢？
This leads us to our second question. So first, we recognize the test and look for God's deliverance, and then we ask, who defines my giants?
所以我们要问第二个问题了，就第一个说这是个试验吗？第二个问题要问就是说，谁是我的巨人呢？
In every situation and test that we face, we have the option of defining giants through our own eyes or through God's eyes.
在每一个困境中，我们有一个选择，就是我们要从我们的眼睛里来看呢，还是从神的眼睛里来看这个巨人呢？
And how you view these giants will affect what resources you see available to you.
所以您是怎么看这个巨人，往往就决定于您的供应、您的资源。
Your perspective determines your provision.
您的观点决定了您的供应。
If you see things from your own perspective, you will probably only see challenges and limitations.
所以，当你从你的自己眼睛来看出来的时候，你往往看到就是一些缺陷不够的地方。
What did the army of Israel see when they looked at Goliath?
所以，当以色列军队在看歌利亚的时候，他们看到什么呢？
They saw a giant.
他们看到一个巨人。
The scripture tells us that Goliath was close to 10 feet tall. That's about as tall as a moving van.
圣经告诉我们，这个巨人大概有10尺之高，大概像一个运货车一样。
His armor weighed 127 pounds.
哇 ，OK， 他的武器大概有重达127磅。
That's the weight of a baby hippopotamus.
就像一个小的犀牛和河马一样。犀牛还是河马？河马。
It says that the head of his spear was 15 pounds. That's like a vacuum cleaner.
它那个矛的那个矛头重达15磅，就像一个吸尘器一样。
So this is a big guy, and he's fully armed.
那这是一个很大的巨人，而且是完全这个所有配备，从牙齿到脚都配备，
It's like he's like a tank.
就像一个坦克车一样。
And the text says that his armor bearer went before him.
然后前面还有替他拿盾的一个仆人。
This man carried his shield and extra weapons, and you had to get through him first, even to get to Goliath.
这个人替他拿了盾，还有他的一些武器，所以你在碰到歌利亚之前，您得先打倒这个仆人。
And because the army of Israel saw Goliath as a regular man defying Israel, they were afraid.
所以以色列人看到这个歌利亚是从一个普通人眼光来看，所以他们就害怕了。
And what's worse is that Saul, as the king, should have been the one defending his people.
更糟糕的是，这个扫罗身为君王，他应该是走在前面的。
In another part of 1 Samuel, it says that Saul was taller than the rest of Israel.
我们看到在别的地方形容说，扫罗比众人都高。
So if anyone should have been standing up to Goliath, it should have been him. But instead, he's scared, just like the rest of his army.
所以应该是他来面对这个巨人的。
And we learned that fear is actually a feeling, it's not a fact.
所以我们知道这个恐惧是一种感受，这不是一个事实。
A lot of times, fear is just us looking at the situation through our eyes and seeing what we don't have, and then we're afraid.
所以我们常常是透过我们自己的眼光来看一个事情，然后我们就害怕了。事实上，这是很多时候这不是真实的状况。
What I'm not saying, though, is that there was nothing to be afraid of. Goliath did represent a real danger.
我不是说你不应该惧怕，格利亚的确是一个很危险的敌人。
But the problem is that Saul and the army let their feelings of fear influence what they thought of God.
问题就是说，这个扫罗跟他军队，让他们的感受来影响到他们对神的认知。
And whenever your fearful feelings are speaking louder in your ear than who God is and what He is capable of, then your fear becomes irrational.
所以，当您对的恐惧影响到您对神的看法的时候，你的这个恐惧不是合理的，不是合理的。
And maybe you've heard it said that fear stands for false evidence appearing real in English, FEAR, false evidence appearing real.
所以我们英语有一个成语，就是它是一个错的，这个恐惧是一个不对的是错误事实的一个证据。
And I think this is very true because you have to discount the existence of God to even be afraid of a giant that God created.
所以我觉得这个是很对的，你必须要把神的存在否认了以后，你才会害怕一个神所创造出来一个所谓的巨人。
So Israel is afraid, but when David sees Goliath, he is not afraid.
所以以色列人害怕，但是大卫他不害怕。
And the reason is that he saw Goliath through God's eyes.
因为大卫是从神的眼光里来看这个巨人的歌利亚。
When David hears Goliath taunting Israel, he says, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that should defy the armies of the living God?"
所以当大卫看到这个非利士人歌利亚，他说：“这个没有受过割礼的非利士人是谁？他居然敢对着神的永生神的军队来叫骂。”
The difference here is that Israel and Saul view Goliath as a threat against themselves and against Israel, the state. But David sees Goliath as defying God himself.
所以这个以色列看的是透过他们眼光看这个巨人是一个危险，是一个挑战。但是大卫的看法是从神的眼睛来看是完全不一样的。
Israel sees their lack of strength and weaponry to face Goliath, and David sees an abundance of strength because he has the army of the living God with him.
所以以色列看到他们在军事上的缺乏，但是大卫看到就是他是永生神的军队在他的后面是完全不同的。
Israel and Saul see Goliath as standing in opposition to their army, but David sees Goliath as standing in opposition to God's blessed covenant people.
所以以色列人看到是歌利亚是对立的是他们的军队，但是大卫看到的是这个非利士人，他对立的是永生神所爱以及与神立约的这个以色列民族。
And David knew that Goliath served a worthless idol, and he served the living God.
最重要的是歌利亚他所侍奉的是一个假神，大卫他所侍奉的是一个永生的真神。
Everyone is seeing the same thing, the same test, the same trial, but their outlook couldn't be more different, right?
所以每个人看到面对的是一个同样的状况，但是他们的看法是真的是南辕北辙。
Israel sees no way of winning. They're cowering in fear for 40 days, listening to Goliath's taunts, but not acting at all.
所以以色列看的就是结局就是大败，然后对于这歌利亚的40天的叫骂就是躲起来了。
But as soon as David hears these taunts, he wants to act on behalf of God because he knows Goliath has no real power.
所以大卫一听到马上要为神去出战，因为他知道这个歌利亚是他没有什么大能力的。
If you've heard this story before, you know what's going to happen. You know that David is going to win.
所以您听过这个故事就知道结局就是大卫是一定会赢的。
But what's important to recognize is that even before David threw the first stone, his victory was guaranteed because of his attitude.
所以最重要是说，在大卫还没有出战，还没有丢那个第一块石头的时候，因为他的态度，他的胜利是已经是确定的。
His perspective determined his provision, and he saw the situation through God's eyes, and he knew he had enough to face the trial.
因为他的观点决定了他的资源，他的供应，他是从神的眼睛来看这个事情，所以说他是用神来供应他，来面对。
And so David tells Saul, "Don't let anyone be discouraged. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine."
所以大卫就对扫罗说：“不要害怕，我要去面对这个巨人。”
See, your giants only look big from your perspective.
所以你的巨人是因为你从你的眼光看来，所以他是一个巨人。
So I want to tell you a quick story about a wise teacher and a young boy that will explain this.
所以我要用一个故事来解释这件事情，就是一个有智慧的老师，一个小男孩的一个对话。
And so the teacher brings this young boy to a field that is frequented by lions.
所以这个老师就带这个小男孩到了一个原野，这里面常常是有狮子出没的一个大草原。
And so they see some lions under a tree, and the teacher points to one and he says, Imagine that God is like that lion, a strong lion, and the accuser, the devil, is like a hyena.
老师就说：“您看到这个树底下休息的这个狮子，神就像那个强壮的狮子一样。那这个邪恶者，这个指控的邪恶者，就像野狗一样。”
And so the teacher asked the boy, Can the hyena hurt the lion?
老师就问这个小男孩：“这个野狗是能不能够伤害到这个狮子呢？”
And the boy says, Yes, he could chase him, and with other hyenas, he could take him down.
这个小男孩就说：“可以呀，因为他们可以这个野狗，他们可以群起而攻之啊。”
And so the teacher says, Well, let's make the lion bigger because God is infinite. Let's make him as big as the whole savannah, the whole field. But the hyena stays the same size because the accuser is not infinite.
那这个老师就说：“那我们因为神是无限大的，那我们就把这狮子给它扩大，像整个这个地方地区一样的大。那这个野狗，因为它是有限的，所以它不会相对的变大。”
So the teacher asked the boy again, Could the hyena hurt the lion? And
所以老师又问：“那你现在觉得这个野狗会伤到这个狮子吗？”
the boy thinks for a moment. He says, Well, he could still bite the lion's foot.
这个小男孩想了一下，就说：“还是有可能啊，因为他可以去攻击他的脚啊。”
So the teacher says, Let's make the lion bigger, as big as the whole country. Can the hyena hurt the lion now?
那我们把那狮子再无限的放大，就像整个的国家一样大。那你觉得还有可能吗？
And the boy thinks for a moment, Well, maybe.
这个男孩想了一遍，还是有可能啊。
And he says, So the teacher says, Let's make the lion as big as the whole world, or as big as the whole universe. And the hyena is now just this little speck on a field. It's still the same size. Could he still hurt the lion?
老师说：“那我们就无限扩大，把这个狮子扩大，像这个整个世界、整个宇宙一样。那这个野狗就像这么一滴一滴一滴一滴的，那你觉得还有可能吗？”
No, the boy says.
那不可能。
So the teacher asks, Can the hyena even threaten the lion at all?
所以说还有可能去威胁到这个狮子吗？
The boy shakes his head no.
男孩就说：“不可能。”
Can the hyena even bother the lion?
也是这个野狗还能够去干扰这个狮子吗？
The boy says no.
No， 可能。
Then the teacher looks down and nods approvingly and says, Always remember, this is how big and powerful your father is.
然后这个老师就终于下了个结论，点点头说：“你以后就要记着这件事情，这就是你的天赋，就是这么的有这么大的大能。”
His strength and his wisdom and his love are infinitely big. And because God is love and you're his son, you are protected.
所以这个神，他唯一能够超越神的，就是神自己的智慧和他对你的爱，因为你是他的爱子，所以他会保护你。
The hyena can only bother those that don't know who they are.
所以野狗唯一能够困扰的人，就是对自己认知是不知道自己身份地位的人的。
So whose perspective are you viewing your giants from?
所以你是从哪个观点来看你的这个巨人呢？
They might seem big from your perspective, but when you see them from God's perspective, they start to look very small.
所以当你从你自己的眼光来看，觉得哇，好了不得了。但是从神的眼光来看，就是这么一滴滴。
So there's one more question to ask.
还有一个问题，
First, we ask, Is this a test? Then we ask, Who defines my giants? And third, we ask, Whose battle is this?
一个问题是这个是试验嘛？第二个问题，这个巨人是由谁来定义呢？第三个问题是这是谁的战局？
And David sees this battle with Goliath through God's eyes. Saul does not.
所以大卫是由神的眼光来看这个战局，扫罗是相反的。
And when David tells Saul, I will fight Goliath, Saul is still very concerned.
所以当大卫愿意出战的时候，扫罗还是很关心的。
And he tells David, You're just a kid. And he's been training as a warrior since he was a kid.
然后扫罗跟大卫说：“哎，你还是个少年人，那这个葛莱亚他是从小就在这个战争里长大的。”
But David looks back at all the other ways that God has already helped him in his life.
那大卫就回想说，跟他讲说，神以往已经在帮助我很多大忙了。
And so he tells Saul, Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God. And David said, The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. And so Saul said to David, Go, and the Lord be with you.
所以在这一段经文是说，你的仆人曾打死狮子和熊，这未受割礼的非利士人向永生神的军队骂阵，也必像狮子和熊一般。大卫又说：耶和华救我脱离狮子和熊的爪，也必救我脱离这非利士人的手。扫罗对大卫说：你可以去吧，耶和华必与你同在。
To David, Goliath is nothing more than an animal, and God has helped David fight lions and bears in the past.
所以对大卫来说，这个革利亚也不过就像狮子跟老虎一样，然后神以前也帮助他打败过狮子跟熊。
But Saul still isn't completely convinced, and he tries to put his armor on David. He's like, okay, you fight. God's delivered you in the past, but you should still wear my armor.
但是扫罗还是有些担心，所以他说：好，你去出战，但是穿上我的盔甲，带到的我的兵器。
But it doesn't fit David, so he doesn't wear it.
呀，但是这个不适合，不合手，所以大卫根本就没穿他盔甲，也没带他的剑。
I think this is kind of funny. The armor is meant to fit Saul.
啊，很好笑，这个盔甲本来是应该是扫罗穿的。
He should be the one fighting Goliath, but his perspective is so limited, he's okay to let a kid go in his place.
本来是应该他穿上披上盔甲去打仗的，但是他却让一个小孩子去穿上他的盔甲去打仗，这不是很好笑吗？
And instead of relying on Saul's military gear, his armor and his sword, David picks up his staff and his sling.
所以大卫根本没有穿这个扫罗的盔甲跟扫罗拿兵器，他拿的就是他自己的牧人的杖跟他的这个甩石机。
He chooses God's protection over his own human devices. And he says, just give me what I use to protect the sheep. That will be enough if God is with me.
他选择是神的保护保守，所以他就说：我就拿着我的杖，拿着我的甩石机就够了，不需要你的兵器。
Over and over again in all of human history, God uses ordinary people and ordinary means to accomplish extraordinary things.
有历史以来，神就一直是用普通的人，用普通的兵器来打所谓的不可能的仗。
And with his normal, little human means, David goes against Goliath, trusting God.
所以大卫因为他相信神，所以就以一个平凡人的拿着平凡的兵器去面对巨人革利亚。
So David says to Goliath, You come at me with sword and spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied.
所以大卫对非利士人说：“你来攻击我是靠着刀枪和铜戟，我来攻击你是靠着万军之耶和华的名，就是你所怒骂带领以色列军队的神。”
Goliath comes with just human resources, but David comes with a God of angel armies who fights the heavenly and earthly battles on behalf of his people.
那葛拉亚他带领的率领是普通的军队，大卫带领的军队是神的天兵天将，然后是能够在上天入地都能够获胜的天军天将。
And so David is able to say, "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down. Then all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that this assembly may know that the Lord saves, not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand."
所以大卫可以如此说：今日耶和华必将你交在我手里，我必杀你，斩你的头，又将非利士军队的尸首给空中的飞鸟、地上的野兽吃，使普天下的人都知道以色列中有神，又使这众人知道耶和华使人得胜，不是用枪，因为征战的胜败全在乎耶和华，他必将你们交在我们手里。
David knows that the battle is not his, it's the Lord's. And he knows that there's something stronger than a giant with a sword.
所以他知道这个战争不是在乎他，而是在乎于神。然后有比这个格利亚巨人更强的力量。
And 1 Samuel 17:50 says, "So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. There was no sword in the hand of David."
所以大卫用击旋甩石胜了那非利士人，打死他。大卫手中却没有刀。
So David is God's champion, and God uses him to overcome the giant.
所以透过了大卫，神是大卫的战将，透过大卫来得胜。
So here's the point. Your victories are not by your own virtue, by your own strength.
所以这个要点在这里，你的胜利不是靠着你自己。
And if you think that you can only win by your own strength, when the battle seems too big, you're going to freeze.
所以当你在面对一个很大的挑战，然后你只想到说我要靠自己的时候，你就完全就会站立，就恐惧了。
We can't win the battle with our own ego. We have to rely on the God who is stronger than us. And if we are going to boast, we have to boast in the Lord and his strength.
不能靠自己来战胜，因为只有靠着神，比我们有能力的大有能力的神，我们才能够战胜，我们才能够夸口。
So whatever trial you face, you can know that God will fight the battle for you.
所以不管您面对的是什么，你知道神一定会为你征战的。
Your giant might not be a real 10-foot human. It may be unemployment or sickness or infertility or challenging relationships, but God will still fight that battle for you.
所以您的巨人可能不是一个巨人，而是失业，或者是不孕，或者是关系不好，或者是等等等等。但是神会为你而战的。
All you need to do is to see your circumstances through God's provision and not your limited perspective.
所以您只要做的事情就是从神的眼光来看这件事情，你就知道神有无限的供应。
You know, David fought against Goliath with the tools of a shepherd, just a staff and a sling.
所以大卫打胜这个巨人的所用的武器，就是一个牧羊人的杖跟一个甩石机。
And I can't help but think of Jesus, the good shepherd, who also fights on our behalf with the tools of a shepherd.
所以我就想到我们的主耶稣基督，我们的好牧人也是如此。
He fought the giant of sin and death, and he didn't use any human weapons to fight that.
所以他战胜了他这个所谓死亡这个巨人，他完全没有用人的方法。
And if Jesus, as the good shepherd, is strong enough to triumph over death itself, how much more can he help you triumph over your problems?
所以我们的好牧人他能够战胜了死亡，那你其他的那些问题又算什么呢？
And so David was God's champion to face the giant of Goliath. Jesus is also our champion that goes before us.
所以大卫能够为这个为神而战，同样的，耶稣基督也可以透过耶稣基督，我们也能够为他而战。
So when you face scarcity, when you face trials and challenges that seem too big or too difficult, you have to ask yourself,
所以当你面对了所谓的哎呀不够资源不够，或者是惧怕的时候，你必须要问自己。
so you ask yourself, is this a test?
你要问第一个，这是一个试验吗？
If so, what do I need to learn from this test?
如果是的话，我要学到什么功课呢？
You ask yourself, who's defining my giants? Am I defining this or is God defining it?
说谁是来决定这个巨人是什么呢？我还是神呢？
And then you ask yourself, whose battle is this? Am I trying to fight this battle alone? Or is this God's battle and I'm just helping him in this battle?
说这到底是谁的战场呢？是我自己呢，还是我只是在旁边给神助阵呢？
So I have two promises from Scripture to read that I want you to hold on to.
所以有两个经文，希望能够对您有所帮助。
So Zechariah 13:9,
大家利啊，
it's talking about the remnant of people that God delivers. And it says, I will bring that group through the fire and make them pure. I will refine them like silver and purify them like gold. They will call me on my name, and I will answer them. I will say, these are my people, and they will say, the Lord is our God.
撒迦利亚，我要使这1/3金火熬炼他们，如熬炼银子；试炼他们，如试炼金子。他们必求告我的名，我必应允他们。我要说，这是我的子民。他们也要说，耶和华是我们的神。
And 1 Peter 1:6-7 says, so be truly glad. There is a wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little while. These trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold, though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world.
彼得前书是这样说的：因此你们是大有喜乐，但如今在百般的试炼中暂时忧愁，叫你们的信心既被试验，就比那被火试验仍然能坏的金子更显宝贵，可以在耶稣基督显现的时候得着称赞、荣耀与尊贵。
Will you pray with me, please?
我一起祷告。
Jesus, we often are making our decisions based on fear or what we lack.
主啊，我们常常是做的决定，就是靠着根据我们自己的恐惧，我们自己所有的。
And we ask that you give us eyes to see through your eyes and not our own.
让我们透过您的视觉观点来看事情。
We ask that you will give us peace in the storms that we face in life.
让我们在面对的困难的时候，能够有平安，能够有你的能力。
We ask that you will help us triumph over our giants, which are very small, in your powerful presence.
让我们能够面对，能够针对我们的所谓的巨人来征战。这个巨人在您面前是不堪一击的。
So whatever challenges we're facing, can you help us see what we need to learn and how you're providing for us?
不管我们面对的是如何的挑战，求主您让我们能够看到您的大能。
And we ask that we don't fail the test. We ask that we become stronger through the test that you give us.
也让我们真的能够通过您给我们的试验，
We ask that you give us abundantly more through our trials.
然后让我们透过一些困难、一些挑战，能够更强壮。
We ask that you give us your blessings and your fruitfulness.
赐给我们你的福气，
We ask that you give us your power and your authority over our trials.
当我们遇见试炼的时候，求主你给我们你的大能，
We ask that you replace our anxiety with maturity.
让我们将我们的恐惧以喜乐来取代，
We ask that you replace our worries with your joy.
把我们的忧烦，用这个喜乐来取代。
Help us have the settled assurance that you will fight our battles for us.
让我们知道主这是一个确据，你会为我们而战。
And help us rest peacefully in the shadow of your wings.
我安息在您的翅膀的这个阴影之。
We ask this in your name.
这样
Amen.
如此祷告，奉主耶稣基督的圣名，阿门。